Today's episode is brought to you by Craftsy, calling all crafters. Are you ready to dive deep into your favorite crafting projects and learn new techniques along the way? Then it's time to join Craftsy Premium Membership. Take advantage of this special promotion. For only $1.49, you'll receive a full year of access to expert-led tutorials, patterns, and projects in every category you can imagine. With a massive library of resources at your fingertips, you'll be able to create your best work yet and bring your crafting dreams to life. Don't wait. Sign up now at CraftsyOffers.com and discover the endless possibilities of Craftsy Premium Membership. Thank you so much, Craftsy. And now, here's the show. Welcome to this special episode of the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals where you can strengthen your creative business, stay up to date on industry news, and build connections within our supportive trade association. Check it out at craftindustryaLliance.org. Today, we have the first of two special episodes celebrating the winners of the 2024 Golden Scissors Awards. This year, for the first time, Craft Industry Alliance was honored to launch the Golden Scissors Awards, which aim to honor excellence in the crafts industry. There are 5 categories for these awards: Emerging Leader, Sustainability, Innovation, Social Impact, and Lifetime Achievement. Winners were honored live on stage at H&H Americas in Chicago. We couldn't have done all of this without our incredible sponsors: Spoon Flour, Jimmy Bean's Wool, Universal Yarn, and Famore. Famore also provided the prizes for each award: a beautiful custom-engraved pair of golden scissors, which the winners received on stage. 4 of our 5 winners were available for interviews on this podcast, and we're very excited to share those with you. These interviews are so inspiring, and we hope you enjoy them. In the second set, we're talking to Masey Kaplan and Jen Simonic, winners of the Innovation Award, and Allyson Allen, winner of the Social Impact Award. We hope you enjoy hearing from each of them. All right, so Masey and Jen, tell me, to get started, a little bit about each of your sort of careers prior to the Loose Ends project, because I'm curious to know what you were doing before all of this started to unfold. So Masey, we'll start with you.
Sure. So my background is in graphic design and marketing. I've worked for various nonprofits over the years and also had multiple entrepreneurial ventures leading up to Loose Ends, but I've always preferred mission-driven work. And I spent the majority of the pandemic working for an organization based in Maine that did food security mission work. And that kind of, as that started to slow down, a little space opened up in my life. And I thought I sort of took a little bit of time to kind of decide what was next, and the timing worked out great.
And were you a crafter? And if so, what kind of crafts did you do?
Yes. So I started knitting when I was 15, took a short break, started again in my 20s, and I've been knitting pretty much constantly ever since. I've also dabbled in lots of things. I've taken weaving classes. I have a wheel, and I do spinning, crochet. I've done some quilting. I've kind of tried lots of things. And I can do lots of different crafts at, I'll say, a C level, but remain a knitter. I mean, I have knitting in my lap right now and another project to my left. So pretty much knitting is it.
Okay. And Jen, what about you? What kind of career activities were you doing prior to the Loose Ends project?
So I started my career as a teacher. I taught public school biology and math for a couple of years. Then I had kids, and Then I worked for the Girl Scouts of Western Washington. Um, and then I started working in a tech company because it turns out if you can sell education and volunteering to people, you can sell other things. So I've been a salesperson and worked on product teams for tech companies. And I was just some startups work and some startups don't. So the second startup I did not work, and I had some free time on my hands at the same time as Masey did too, which was nice. So that's what I did. So in the corporate world, I did sales enablement, and project. I don't know, whispering. I was the person who made sure people understood what the project was supposed to have done between sales and the engineers, which is.
And what kind of crafting are you? Also a knitter? I see.
I am
Yes.
also a knitter.
Okay.
I'm knitting socks right now, which I never liked, but I'm starting to enjoy, except they're a little fiddly, and the Chow needles are putting holes in my fingers because they're just so darn good.
Oh my gosh, yes, that happens to me too, but I love it.
them, and I will
bad.
not use other ones, but
Yeah.
I won't go back. But man, I had to develop some calluses because I was bleeding on my knitting. And I've done, when I was a teen, I did a lot of cross stitch. That was very popular in the 80s. And I've done crocheting, but again, at a C level, I think, but knitting's my favorite.
Okay. And then how did the two of you meet? Because you don't live in the same state. Is that correct?
We live as far apart
Yes.
as possible, I think.
Okay. So Jen, where are you located?
I'm in Seattle, Washington.
And what about you, Masey?
Portland, Maine.
Okay. So coast to coast for sure.
Coast to coast.
So how do you know each other?
We had the fortunate kismet of marrying two people who went to college together and were friends. I went to college with my husband and Masey's husband, and they went to school for architecture, and apparently they don't make new friends. They just have the same friends forever. It's not a slam on them. It's very nice. And because of that, Masey and I had the opportunity to meet up every couple of years to hang out with the other friends. And once I run out of things to say about architecture, which is in about a minute, we got to go and, sneak off and look at yarn shops and do things like that. So we've been allies and friends ever since.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. All right. So let's get to the Loose Ends project. Maybe, Masey, you can describe what it is, and then we can talk about how this idea came to you all.
Yeah, so Loose Ends, we're a nonprofit that matches volunteer textile handwork finishers with projects that people have left behind due to death or disability or failing health. And we make the matches between the finishers and the project owners. Finishers finish up whatever that project was, and then return it back to the family that it was being made for. In a nutshell.
Yeah, that is it. And I think we all can relate to this either because we've found unfinished projects in our friends and relatives' houses that we wish they could have finished. And, seeing the work of somebody's hands is always such a personal thing, and wanting to have that finished, object completed. There's something so sad about, starting something and not being able to finish it. Or we've been to thrift stores and seen those there as well, and just wondered who it was who started this and who their family was, et cetera. So, and I think just from the crafter perspective, there's so many people who would be happy to do that service for sure if they only knew who to do it for and what was needed. So it's like a beautiful sentiment for sure. And I think there's no arguing with that. Like, I think everybody could embrace the idea. So did this idea come to you all because this happened to you, or how did the sort of the seed of the idea begin? Masey, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think Jen and I have both finished projects for friends who had lost their mothers. Um, and just to have the skill to be able to do that when your friend does not have it, and to be able to bring that finished, it was garments in my case, Jen. I don't know if
Yeah,
about
sweater.
yours, but to be able to bring that finished garment back in a way that someone can put it on themselves and wear it and kind of just feel that, have that tangible um, connection to their loved one. Um, so we had both had this experience of doing this for friends, and it just felt really, really good to be able to do that for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And
What it,
yeah, and so uh, I had finished a sweater during COVID for a friend who lost her mom. And at that time, it was just like it 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 would just, Jen and I had been talking about it, and it occurred to us that we weren't the only ones who do this. I mean, people have done this forever, right? For each other.
Yeah.
When you have the skills, you do it for your friends or family members. But if you don't have the skills to do it, like, you still have the projects, and it just seemed like there was an opportunity to kind of make these connections happen, right? um, we certainly learned during COVID times that you don't need much to get a lot of work done. And with Jen and I being on different sides of the country, we were able to just kind of use technology to build the tools to try to make these connections. And we tried it on. So we had been together on the West Coast at a little bit of a college reunion. And at that time, we had a mutual friend who had recently lost her mom. Jen and I were helping her go through her mom's things and try to decide what to do with what. What do you want to keep? What do you want to donate? What do you want to give to this place or that place? And in the process of going through our mutual friends' mom's stuff, we found a couple of blankets that she had started for her sons. And it was kind of at that moment. I mean, prior to that moment, Jen and I had only talked about the doing loose ends someday. And it was kind of in that moment that we thought, you know what? I wonder if the time is right to just give this a try. And we would be able to start with these 2 blankets as our pilot, basically, and just to try it on and see. Like, we knew it felt great to do. We suspected other people would want to do it too. But we thought, what the heck? Let's make the website. Let's make the buttons for people to sign up. Let's see if we can invite people to become volunteers. Let's invite people to submit projects that they would like finished, and see if it has legs. And so that was it. That was kind of the beginning. And it definitely has its roots in personal experience of finishing things for people.
and so what was the infrastructure, the online infrastructure that you built, and did it change as time went by?
For sure. I'll start with the beginning infrastructure, and then I'll pass it over to Jen for the continuing infrastructure. So
Okay.
when we first began, I made a Squarespace website, right? And we didn't have any money. So at the time we used what we could use for free or for whatever we were willing to just kind of invest ourselves. And we used Google Forms that populated Google spreadsheets. It gave people the opportunity to sign on as volunteers, and for us to be able to just search these spreadsheets that started to grow and grow and grow and grow. So we do still have a Squarespace website, but those buttons, or one of the biggie, the sign up to become a finisher button, no longer connects people to a spreadsheet, because right around the time that the 17,000th volunteer signed up, Jen and I on opposite sides of the country we would be in this spreadsheet watching this little circle spin and spin and spin, and it didn't like us anymore. So right around that time, actually before that time, we started to make other plans, and I'll let Jen talk about those other plans because it's a fun story.
Yeah. So around Christmas, we got our first TV spot of, local interest news, like Christmassy, somebody coming into my house and filming my yarn wall and saying, how is all of this used for the project? I'm like, it's not what we do. But my neighbor, who is a web designer and coder, apparently went to bed saying to his wife, I am not helping Jen with this. And I was like, I didn't ask him to. And at the beginning, we didn't really need to because we only had by December of 22, we had 500 finishers and maybe 20 projects. But the next day, Mark came over and said, hey, I think I have a better way for you to get more finishers in. And I was like, I don't really think we need that. He's like, you probably are going to need that. And thank God for Mark, because by the time he had built out the whole website, or the web app for us, we had 17,000 finishers in our spreadsheets, and it was really hard to match things because it's just, I don't know if you've had a spreadsheet that big. It's just really hard. So Mark and a team of volunteer developers have made an app for us that allows us to put in an address and search the finishers nearby. Like if I put in my address in Seattle and I search for finishers, I get about 700 little pinpricks all over the Seattle area. And then we can hone it down like, okay, who knows how to knit? And it'll show us the beginning, intermediate, and expert knitters. And I think that might have something to do with why we won this innovation award. Finishing projects for other people is not a new idea. I'm sure most of the people who are crafters who are listening to this have done it. And that seems to be the one thing in the comments that we always get is like, I've been doing this for years. We're like, yes, people do this.
Right.
Like, yes, we did not invent this. This has been happening since people started crafting. People die and people pick up their thread and go. What is different is a lot of people who find these projects are not crafters. And the one person who passed away in their family who was the crafter is no longer there. Or they're crafters, but they do a different craft. We have finishers in our group that, they might be quilters, but grandma left a knit sweater. What's different and innovative about what we do is we are making those connections with people around them who don't have those crafters in their families, which is a big deal for people. And the fun part about it is because we have so many volunteers right now, we're almost at 25,000 volunteers in 64 countries. And the fun part is because we have so many volunteers, we can really match people very closely. So when we make the match, we're making a match based on location, on ability, and it's a self-described ability. And the last thing is their druthers. What do they want to do? Because even though I can crochet, I don't like crocheting. It hurts my hand. So I'd rather not do a crochet project. And we never want to make the project that the finisher has be something they're not into. We want them to enjoy the process. So they tell us when they sign up, like, oh, I love doing sweaters. I love making quilts. I hate paper piece quilting. Okay, there's some, and inevitably there's someone who loves paper piece quilting. So there's no need to do anything you hate. Let's do things you like for good reasons.
And you've learned a lot about quilting through this, because although maybe each of you had done a little bit here and there, or at least Masey had done a little bit here and there, that certainly doesn't sound like it was either of your forte. And there's a lot to learn. I mean, even understanding that paper piecing is a technique that's different from English paper piecing, for example. Like there's a lot of differences here, and somebody who doesn't understand the terminology might have difficulty matching people and understanding whether they were capable of finishing this project. So how did you set about learning about quilting, Masey?
Oh, well, I had made simple quilts with my mom growing up. And I had made some baby quilts, and I am not an expert at all. And there are so many terms that I learned only since diving into loose ends. One really, really special, there are a number of ways we learn. Obviously, Googling things. And we also now have a part-time matchmaker employee, Sarita, who even yesterday I had to send her a picture and say, look at this picture of this quilt. Is this something that would need to be finished by hand? And she wrote back, yes. Like, we just have to find out information still. One really, really kind of nifty thing that happened early on is we made a private Facebook finisher group, so a private group just for people who were officially registered as finishers, just as a place to start to create some community around the finishers. And that has become an invaluable resource for us. It is, on the one hand, a place where finishers who have active projects can go in and show them off, and also even show off some things that they've done in the past before loose ends. But it's also become a place where we can post pictures and ask questions of people who know way more than we do about things. What is this pattern? Sometimes things are left behind without enough materials or without a pattern with them.
Right.
But here is this 3/4 of a sweater, and it requires a pattern to finish. So we will be able to post these pictures and say, help, does anyone know XYZ? And invariably within minutes, usually, there are more than 10,000 of the finishers are in this group too. So, but I want to say within minutes, but certainly by overnight, there is a list of feedback from people ranging from, I know what this pattern is, to I don't, but I'm going to go dig it up and find it. And people there are sleuths in there. There are experts in there. There are people willing to recreate patterns that we can't find so that the finisher working on it will have something to go on. There are people searching for rare and long lost yarns that are tricky to find. It's just this amazing people. What is this stitch? What is this craft? Sometimes we have to say, help, what is this? It's qualifies because it's made with string, but this isn't anything I've seen before. And it's just this amazing. So how do we find out? Have we learned? That's been a huge way we've learned. People
I have to tell
school
you,
us.
People in the crafting industry have been so remarkably generous with their time. For quilting, for example, a woman from Hobbs Fiber Fusible Fabric spent 2 hours talking to me about 1.5 years ago, just because she's like, if you're going to work on quilts, this is what you should do, and this is how you should do it, and these are the types of things. And I sat next to her at H&H, unbeknownst to either of us, and she's like, I talked to you 1.5 years ago, and I was like, we also have I have a friend, Sandy Glenn, who is a modern quilter, and she has been invaluable. We can call her and ask her for help.
Right.
The Grace Company came to us and said, hey, we love what you do. Let's figure out how we can help you. So the industry itself has just, they see the value in this because this is their customers who are going to die with unfinished projects, and they see the value in helping us grow so that they're taking care of their customers to the end, which I think is, amazing. It's an amazing industry that we're a part of that was just so much fun to discover more of this May and when we went to H&H. So.
Yeah. And I think that again speaks to the innovation aspect of what you're doing, which is that first, you're bringing it to the industry. And second, though, you're using Facebook as a way to connect, crowdsource, motivate. I mean, there's so much there, right? So again, people have been doing this forever, but now they're brought together in community online and have a structured way to continue to do this or ramp up what they were doing or do it even better and help more people. And so I think that truly speaks to the innovation here. So as we wrap up, can you tell us a little bit about plans for what's coming up for Loose Ends? Anything interesting on the horizon or ideas that you have? Anything that you would like to share there?
Dreams we're dreaming?
Dreams.
Or plans we're planning?
Either one. Both qualify.
Well, I think that the first thing we need to do, the first thing we're doing is we're trying to grow very thoughtfully. We grew from, like Jen said, like in a couple of months after the first tiny story, we had about 500 finishers. And we've been around, let's see, in September will be 2 years. So we have not been around for very long, and we've grown very quickly to have about 25,000 finishers. And so for a lot of this past 2 years, we've been like running full speed, trying to make sure that we're accommodating everything, that working with the tech folks. We were able to recently hire our first person to help. I think that on the horizon, in terms of growth, the first thing we would like to do is be able to secure enough funding so that we have we just need a little bit more help. Like we need to be able to hire a little bit more support because we work a little bit too hard, I would say. And it would be great to have maybe like another full-time person. So in terms of dreaming dreams and making a plan, I think that's probably the first thing that we want to do in terms of this year. We have tech happening that's going to change a lot of the way that we do matching. When the NPR story came out, we had a lot of people reach out to us, and the thing that they heard, one of the things we were laughing about, because during the interview for them, Jen, I think, mentioned like we are poring over spreadsheets at the time.
We're looking at
my eyeballs
spreadsheets till my eyeballs bleed.
Yeah,
and that was the tech community did not like that. They wanted to help, which was lovely.
It was awesome. Like we started getting inundated with offers to help us. Like, you should not be in spreadsheets anymore. Like, what can we do to help? Like, I'm not a knitter, I'm not a quilter, but I can code, I'm a programmer. Can we help you? So we were able to put together a team of Mark, who was the person who was starting us out with a better method, was able to get a little small team of amazing tech helpers. So our tech needs to grow. That's going to happen this year. That's in the process of actually happening, hopefully soon. Dreaming dreams someday. We would love to have a podcast where we bring together.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, bring together the project owners and the finishers who sometimes don't meet each other. So it would just like be a really nice. There's so much storytelling.
Everyone has a story. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's one thing. I don't know if that's going to happen soon, but that's
a great idea for the future. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have a couple of merch ideas that we're playing with too.
I'm just trying to get it so it's not. We'd like to get a little bit more stability and a longer road to run out.
Yeah,
sure. But I think the fact that you've been so busy, it just really speaks to the fact that like you have a great thing going here. Do you know what I mean? Like you don't have to get out there. I mean, you have, and like, sell it, because as soon as people hear about it, they're on board,
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing is that crafts, we kind of have we're in these two worlds. We're in the world of crafting, which doesn't really have any barriers. I mean, there are crafters everywhere. There's a reason people have signed up from 64 different countries to be finishers, right? There are crafts, people making things with their hands, their textiles everywhere and all over the place. Like there's no there's no demographic that you can define that are crafters, right? They're everyone.
I mean,
Likewise,
there's the people assume are crafters, but that stereotype doesn't really hold out if you look at our finishers.
It's everybody. It's everybody from everywhere. And likewise, loss will affect everybody too. Like nobody doesn't die, right? Like nobody doesn't lose people that they love. This is the universal human experience. And when you look at both of those, sides of our organization, it's kind of like, there's a reason why I think our mission sort of applies to so many people. It's crafts and grief.
Yeah.
So,
well, Masey and Jen, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of the story of Loose Ends with us, and congratulations on winning the 2024 Innovation Award. It was wonderful to have you on stage at the show, and we can't wait to see everything grow.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was amazing to be there, and we love that we got to meet all you guys.
Yeah. What a great opportunity. Thank you so much for helping us spread the word.
Of course.
Huge.
Thank you. I want to take a minute now to talk about our sponsor, Craftsy. At Craftsy, we know making. Whether you're new to the handmade life or looking to advance your skills, we have classes for all maker levels and interests. From knitting and sewing to quilting and embroidery, cooking, baking, paper crafts, and more, Craftsy's instructors guide and encourage you, empowering you to turn ideas into realities. And they have an exclusive offer for Craft Industry Alliance podcast listeners. Right now, you can get a whole year of their premium membership for only $1.49. Visit CraftsyOffers.com to sign up, and the discount will be automatically applied at checkout. For only $1.49, you'll get a full year of access to over 2,000 premium full-length classes. Take your craft to new levels this year with Craftsy. If you're an absolute beginner, Craftsy's instructors help build strong foundations as they teach, setting you up for success and helping you fix mistakes as you go. Their enthusiasm and strong teaching style make learning accessible to all. If you're an experienced maker, Craftsy's for you too. From perfecting your fondant skills to tackling complex stitches, from eye-catching garden design to next steps in sourdough, Craftsy has advanced classes in all crafts from instructors who are experts in their field. With over 2,000 classes, including downloadable patterns and recipes, Craftsy has a class and a craft for everyone. Visit CraftsyOffers.com today and get a year of Craftsy premium membership for just $1.49. Don't miss out on 99% off for the entire year. Start turning ideas into projects you can be proud of. Get this exclusive offer at CraftsyOffers.com. Thank you so much, Craftsy. And now, my conversation with Allyson Allen. Hi, Allyson. So nice to have you on the podcast. Congratulations on winning the Golden Scissors Social Impact Award in 2024. We are thrilled for you, and I'm excited to learn more about your journey and your artistic career. So maybe we can start with going a little far back. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what you were like as a kid.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me. And thank you so much for considering my work and honoring me with the award. When I received the scissors, they're so much more beautiful than I had expected. I really was thinking it was going to be a pin. And they're really much bigger than a pin. I have always been interested in art, even as a kid. I won a scholarship in third grade for an art piece, and it paid for my books when I got to college at USC. So I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born back east, but all of my schooling from elementary all the way through college was in the Los Angeles area. I ended up going to USC undergrad and graduate school. I received my master's and my teaching credential in English and special ed. And I taught in the LA area for a couple of years. Then I moved out of LA further east to where I am now in the Inland Empire. But every year I would teach myself a different handcraft or different type of artwork. One year I made handmade soap. One year I did tatted lace. One year I learned to, I started quilting. And I circled back around to quilting in the 90s. And I kind of, between crochet and quilting, those are the two I kind of loved the most. And so those are the two I continued to do. But from the time I was 6 years old, my older sister had taught me how to work a sewing machine. And when I was coming up through school, we still had home ec classes. So I was always the TA in every home ec class because I was the only person besides the teacher who could thread or work any of the sewing machines. And so sewing was always a big part of my background. My mom sewed the school clothes for me and my sister when we were in school. And so it was just a big part of what I already knew how to do. The first time I sent a quilt off for a quilt show was back in maybe 1992 or 93. And I entered a piece in a quilt show in Canada. And I mailed the quilt off, and it had to be gone for 6 weeks. And I was holding my breath the whole time because I was waiting to get it back. But from then, I had decided, well, that was fun and I could do it. So it was something I was going to do anyway. So I just started quilting, and I've always created my work for other people to see. I almost never create my work for sale. I create it to display or to exhibit. In 92, I met a woman through my sister and brother-in-law started a nonprofit. Coretta Scott King had assembled a bunch of entertainers and public figures and community people in Atlanta in 92 after the riots in Los Angeles. And she asked around the table what each person had planned to do as a contribution to their community in response to the civil unrest. And when they got around to my brother-in-law, he's an actor, he said he'd like to start a summer camp because he has a ranch property outside of Los Angeles. And since he knew that my sister and I had camp background, then he was relying on us when he just volunteered and said, we want to start a summer camp. So in 1992, we started, his camp was called Camp Giddy Up. It was a Western themed summer camp. And because I had directed Troy Camp for USC, then my brother-in-law knew I had experience and background as a camp director, and my sister and I were involved with Troy Camp for over 12 or 15 years growing up. I was one of the first campers that had attended camp and then grew up and went to SC and ended up being the director of the camp. So in 92, one of the counselors we had at the camp was a woman who worked with Southern California Youth Authority in the prison systems. And she asked if I had ever applied for an art grant. And I told her no. So she kind of directed me and guided me in how to apply for my first artist grant back in 1992. And we received the grant from me to teach classes at one of the facilities where she worked. And I worked for California Youth Authority as an artist in residence for 9 years after that, teaching quilting and doll making. And the inmates received community service credit for the projects that we were making. And we were donating those baby quilts and dolls to children with AIDS or orphans of AIDS. And from there, from 92 on, I just every year continued to apply for artist grants for my work, because then I felt like I didn't have to sell the work. I was already being paid to create it through the grants. So in the past 35 years or so since then, I've received over 45 grants to create my work and to exhibit it. And that's what I do. Every year, I create a new multi-piece exhibit between 9 and 15 pieces. And in 2010, I was interviewed by Time Warner Cable for Black History Month piece. And one of the large quilt shows, Mancuso, National Quilt Shows, saw the interview on Time Warner, and they invited me to send several pieces as a special exhibit. So from 2010, every year, Mancuso reserves special exhibit space for whatever I'm sending. And it is such an honor and a blessing. They don't ask me for images up front or anything. They just want to know the theme and how many pieces and roughly what size space they need to set aside for me. And then they give me free reign. And so every year, since I'm creating that many to send off, then when I get them back the following year, that's another whole lecture that I can offer with the quilts as trunk show for that lecture. And that's how my stash of quilts has multiplied. My guest room is not for guests anymore. It's just the bed stacked with, year after year of quilts. I literally have over 250 quilts in my guest room, and I can pull an entire exhibit from those at any time. So I have so much work out that I've loaned or that's circulating in other exhibits, and I don't know what's out half the time until I get it back. But I make the work for other people to see it and to enjoy it.
Tell us a little bit about what the quilts look like. Is it traditionally piece quilts? Are there specific techniques that you use, colors you're drawn to? Are they, representational or more abstract? Tell us a little bit about the kind of quilts that you make.
Well, from the early on in the 90s, I was using the quilts, teaching Black history and teaching about contemporary and social contemporary issues in the public and private schools. So each piece I consider a teaching moment. And I think any piece of artwork can be that. But I was kind of focused early on in an effort to make the quilts another way to teach history, and specifically Black history. So the majority of my work relates to either replicating artwork from other African American artists from the Harlem Renaissance or from other countries, or I do a lot of replicas of famous artwork that's paintings or sculptures or photography, but I interpret them in fabric. So every one of the quilts or every one of the exhibits that I put together actually has a very specific theme that aligns with either Black history or folklore, African folklore, or they deal with contemporary social issues. I use a lot of ethnic fabrics because anytime anyone travels for more than 30 years, they know whatever souvenir they're bringing me, just make it a piece of fabric from wherever they're going. And I truly have a stash from heaven. I don't buy fabric for the tops. I have not purchased fabric for the top of a quilt in over a decade because I've been gifted so much fabric. And I only buy needles and batting. I don't have to buy fabric. I just shop my stash, and that's how I create an exhibit. The size of the piece, the main piece of fabric that I want to feature on the quilt, that determines the size of the quilt. And I just go from there. So most of my work is history focused or social issue focused.
And is it applique?
Needle turn applique is my favorite technique, but I do raw edge applique on the machine. I do some machine applique. I do the background of every quilt is always machine pieced, and then whatever imagery I'm putting on it will be appliqued on top of it. And my thing, I love to use a lot of dimensional embellishments because I really want people to step close to the quilt and wonder, is that part of the fabric or is that something that's on top of it? And the thing about quilts that's kind of fun, you're not supposed to touch them, but you want to touch them. And I try to make it where there's a lot of buttons and beadwork, and I'll have shells, and I'll do special knot techniques with the embroidery thread, and a lot of things to create dimensional visual texture on all of the pieces. I enjoy also sewing on uh, broken jewelry and found objects, so the piece is very dimensional.
And it sounds like there's been kind of a social justice, social impact theme in your work from the very beginning. That was like a motivator from the beginning. I want to specifically talk about the exhibit that the award sort of recognized, which was in Laguna Beach. So talk about that one in particular, because it sounds like there's been many, but and what your idea was for that, and what the reception was, etc.
Okay. Well, that was another grant funded exhibit. I received what was called the 7 Degrees of Inspiration Award from Laguna Beach Arts Alliance and Laguna Beach Art Council. And it was to create a piece of artwork. It could have been a short film or a series of photographs or paintings for the Laguna Beach Arts Council. I received it in 2018, and then things were shuttered, and I already had the fabric that I was pulling for the exhibit. But I did tell them in the last meeting that we had before everything was closed down, I had told them that the theme of the exhibit I would create would focus on protest art. So
Mm,
each piece was going to represent a sign that you might see at a protest. So every piece had text on the
mm,
quilts. And I enjoy creating what I call the juxtaposition between harsh text and soft quilted textiles because it's something you would not expect. So they did look just like protest signs, but they were all quilted, and it was a variety of topics. It was animal activism, Black Lives Matter, um, women's rights, voting rights, LGBTQ recognition. It was and then after the exhibit was created, since it was after COVID, it even included the controversy about whether or not to wear masks. It had imagery about protesting war. And so it was a wide variety. It was going to be 24 pieces, but because I had so much time to create it, since it wasn't actually due the very following year, we still had to be shuttered. So I had almost 2 years to work on it. So it ended up being 36 pieces.
wow.
And, but when we got shut down, um, from March to August in 2019, I had all this fabric. So I started making fabric masks. And that was what was needed the most in my immediate community and around the country, because the first responders were saying they were having so much trouble securing the multi-layered masks because individuals are buying them to be able to still go out and, go shopping and go to the bank and things like that. So I started making the fabric masks, and between March and August 2019, I made over 1,500 three-layered fabric masks, and I mailed them all over the country. I mailed them to Native American reservations. I mailed them to food distribution workers, to post offices for postal workers, to grocery stores, because those are the venues that were still open. And I started with my own immediate community and my immediate neighbors, and then started mailing out. And I did not charge for not one single mask because I already had the fabric. And I would mail to, for example, a church or a community center. I would mail them a dozen masks because they were interested in having a meeting and making their own. And they'd assemble a group of 6 or 8, volunteers, and they figured out it took them so long to make one mask that they box up all the rest of the fabric, and they're mailing me the boxes of fabric. And so that it just continues, where people kept sending me fabric in exchange for me sending them an already completed mask. And it just added to my stash. So it replenished the fabric that I used, because I used the exhibit fabric to make the masks, but I was getting fabric back in the mail. So I continued to create the exhibit pieces. When we were finally able to continue planning the Laguna Beach exhibit, it was supposed to be on the second floor of a Wells Fargo building in Laguna Beach. The building is about a block away from the ocean, really beautiful venue. The building is circular. And so the gallery was really fun because you step inside the bank and there's a staircase in the center of the bank that goes to the second and third story, but you can see all 3 levels while you're downstairs in the bank. And for more than 20 years, the Laguna Beach Arts Alliance had a lease with the bank to exhibit art from the community and from their out of the community grant exhibits on the second and third floor of the bank. This was the first time in their 20-year relationship with the bank that there was an issue. And it was because a handful of individuals, I'm talking fewer than 5 people, went into the bank on a Thursday or Friday while we were installing the exhibit. And they looked up and saw some of the pieces. And 2 or 3 of the pieces had political connotations. And they mentioned to the bank manager, that's more appropriate for a private gallery, not a public gallery. And the bank manager let these 2 or 3 individuals determine whether or not we could continue with the installation. By that weekend, the curator of the exhibit had contacted me and said, I think we're going to have to pull it down. And I thought she meant just the 3 or 4 pieces that they had an issue with. She was saying the bank is suggesting that we use this weekend to find a different venue. And she was panicked. She was distressed. She was very disappointed. Well, there happened to be 2 community members who saw it going up on a Wednesday and a Thursday, and then saw it coming down on Friday and Saturday. They contacted their local paper. And after the local paper came out to interview the bank manager, and the bank manager had no comment, just referred them to the Wells Fargo website that says we attempt to be inclusive and something ridiculous that really was not falling in line with what was happening. Then 2 different television news stations got hold of the story. They came out and interviewed some Laguna Beach residents, And one of the residents said, I understand that there were pieces that might have offended me, but now I'm offended because I don't get to judge for myself. And then the radio station heard about the story and invited me to come speak. And before I had gone on this radio station, they had interviewed the mayor. And the mayor of Laguna Beach said, it's art. If you don't want to see it, don't look at it. So the whole community was rallying behind me, not behind the bank and these 2 or 3 customers. Part of that is because in Northern California, Berkeley is a notorious art community. In Southern California, Laguna Beach is our artist colony. From the time you enter the edge of the city limits, there's public art both sides of the street. There are artist lofts, artist studios, there are art colleges. And so the established Laguna Beach community is an art colony. And they were just up in arms and appalled that 2 or 3 individuals could determine what the city was going to be able to display as another exhibit. Well, over the course of that first weekend, the curator was contacted by several individuals in the community, including the Laguna Beach Cultural Arts Center and the Laguna Beach Art Museum. But if I had taken the exhibit to those venues, I would have had to split it and have it at 2 different places. By Monday or Tuesday, this is like 4 days after it had come down, the neighborhood Congregational Church in Laguna Beach, which is a multi-denominational spiritual center, they had contacted the curator and said, please come visit the campus and see if it's big enough to house the exhibit, because we would love to invite it, since that whole theme is a very foundation of a lot of the conversations we encourage within our own spiritual community. And we went to the venue and it was so beautiful. The sanctuary on one side of a courtyard, and then their reception hall on the other side of the courtyard. And it just had the stained glass windows and the beautiful light coming in. And it was so much more welcoming. It was just a beautiful, special space. And so the exhibit ended up being displayed there. And it was actually a better venue. And because we had gotten additional attention through the newspaper and the radio station and the TV station, people came out to see it who might not have even walked upstairs in the bank because they wanted to see what was all the fuss about. We had volunteer docents every day that the exhibit was open. It was open for 3 months. We had volunteers every day. We had different days when I would try to come out and give gallery talks or artist talk and meet whoever was coming to view. We had special events that the Spiritual Center was putting on in conjunction with the exhibit over the 3 months. So it just ended up being better than it would have been if it was in the bank. Before we ended up taking it down, the bank had drawn up new paperwork and had presented it to the Arts Council, saying from that point on, the bank manager would have the discretion of approving or disapproving any future artwork exhibited in the bank. And after a more than 22-year long relationship between the Laguna Beach Arts Alliance and Wells Fargo Bank, the relationship was terminated. The Arts Alliance said, no, we don't expect the bank manager to have to give us approval to exhibit artwork in this community when we have used our own discretion to be able to do this for more than 2 decades. Nothing in the exhibit displayed nudity. There was no foul language. They were just offended because there were 2 or 3 pieces that had political content. Now, it's ironic because each time I was interviewed, I was asked, do you think this will be relevant next year or 5 years from now? Or what do you see with the exhibit? I said, unfortunately, this was relevant 20 years ago. It's relevant today, and unfortunately will continue to be relevant in our near future because as a species, we don't, while the exhibit was up, Ukraine was invaded, and I had pieces in there about war. I mean, there just were events that I had pieces in there about voting, and then voting rights were restricted in the southern states. And that's when books were being banned in the southern states. So there were pieces in there that I wish would have been obsolete, but they were still relevant.
It's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing it. And it speaks very loudly about the bank's choices. So there's a lot to think about there. I want to make sure we talk about your friend, Paula White. Paula was able to travel to Chicago or be in Chicago to accept the Golden Scissors Award on your behalf. And she was just so lovely. And I would like to know a little bit about your relationship with her and how the two of you became friends.
Well, in 2015, I was teaching and lecturing for the same Mancuso National Quilt Shows in Palm Springs and in Northern California in San Jose. And in San Jose, Paula took one of my classes, and my niece was like my TA or my teaching assistant. Two of my nieces have both received artist grants with me, master apprentice grants, where I was the master artist and they were the apprentice from the state of California. And they both received those grants before they were even 10 years old. So I was teaching them quilting at that age. So Krista and Paula met each other in my class and they kind of hit it off. And Krista and her sister are both phenomenal sketch artists. And Krista's medium or favorite medium is charcoal and pencil. So Paula said she wanted to see, if Krista could do a portrait for her based on one of Paula's favorite photographs that was just on her phone. So she sent Krista the image on her phone, and 2 weeks later, Krista sent her the drawing. And Paula was so excited and taken aback, she mailed Krista a box of fabric. Now, I didn't know anything about this, and the class was in October. Krista held on to the fabric until Christmas, and then she gave the box of fabric to me. And when I asked her where did she get it, because the stuff in the box was just fantastic, and it all still had the price tags on it. I mean, there was hand-dyed fabric in there, $25 a yard. It was stuff that I don't buy to quilt with, but it was still beautiful quilters' cottons. And Krista told me it was from Paula. So I made something for Paula and a gift for Paula. The class she took with me was quilted journals. So I made her a quilted journal out of some of the fabric she sent me. And I sent it back with a thank you note. She started mailing boxes of fabric to me. This was 2015. This went on for 2.5 years, and her birthday's 4th of July. So every birthday and every Christmas, I would make her something handmade, and I would mail it to her with a birthday card or a Christmas card, because it was just so insignificant compared to the amount of fabric that she was sending me. Well, when the pandemic happened, then for 4th of July, I sent her a half dozen masks. And she emailed me. And what's funny, we've never spoken to each other on the phone. We've known each other for years, and we only just email or through the regular mail. I sent her a half dozen of the masks I was making, and she emailed and said, "Oh my goodness, these arrived so timely, you just wouldn't believe. Is there any way I could pay you to make enough for everyone on my shift?" And I said, "No, you can't pay me to make them. I'm not selling them. How many do you need?" She said, "Well, there are 120 nurses on my shift." That was the first time I knew the woman was a nurse. I didn't know she was a first responder. And this was during the pandemic. And she had mailed me thousands of dollars of fabric between 2015 and this time in 2019. So I made the 120 masks and sent them back right away. And then Christmas, I made 100 more out of Christmas fabric she had sent me and sent them back. Paula mailed me a sewing machine. And it's the sewing machine I've been sewing on since then in 2020. And so when you contacted me and told me that I had been graced with receiving the award, I was so excited. But the dates, I needed to be in Chicago that 1st or 2nd of May. And on the 4th of May, I had to be in San Francisco for an Alaska cruise. And I was thinking I would be going in and out of the airport in Chicago longer than I would actually be there. And I would be taking a chance on getting back in time to get to San Francisco and make my cruise. So you suggested that I contact anyone who could receive it for me. And Paula happens to live in Chicago. I had no idea if she was close by the venue, but she said it wasn't a problem and she would accept for me. And I thought that that was almost like a full circle kind of thing, because we had met through crafting and through quilting. And I was very pleased that she could accept the award for me.
That's truly a beautiful story. I love it so much. Allyson, this has been wonderful. Thank you for sharing your background and your journey and your story with us. Congratulations again. You truly are deserving of the Social Impact Award, and we're so glad that you won this year. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughtful consideration of my work. And the scissors are so beautiful. And I displayed them at the reception last weekend, where I displayed the largest piece I've ever created. It's 16 feet by 16 feet. And I displayed the scissors on a pedestal right next to the piece. And everyone was looking at the scissors.
They're huge. So that's wonderful. Well, thank you. That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to our award winners for sharing their stories today. And thanks again to our award sponsors, Spoonflower, Jimmy Bean's Wool, Universal Yarn, and Famore. And you've been listening to the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Thank you to today's episode sponsor, Craftsy, calling all crafters. Are you ready to dive deep into your favorite crafting projects and learn new techniques along the way? Then it's time to join Craftsy Premium membership. Take advantage of this special promotion. For only $1.49, you'll receive a full year of access to expert-led tutorials, patterns, and projects in every category you can imagine. With a massive library of resources at your fingertips, you'll be able to create your best work yet and bring your crafting dreams to life. Don't wait. Sign up now at CraftsyOffers.com and discover the endless possibilities of Craftsy Premium membership. Thank you so much, Craftsy. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals. When you become a member of Craft Industry Alliance, you get in-depth coverage of craft industry news, the opportunity to connect with fellow professionals for advice and support, and access to an educational library filled with ideas, tools, and resources to help you as you build your business. Join us at craftindustryalliance.org. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.